The heart-wrenching scream that came from the second-floor bedroom froze me at the entrance of that mansion. It was a sound I'll never forget, the perfect mixture of physical pain and emotional agony from someone who had lost all hope. I ran up the stairs with my caregiver's bag in one hand and my heart beating so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. I found her collapsed on the bathroom floor, in a pool of her own vomit streaked with blood, trembling like a leaf as she tried to clean herself with a towel she could barely hold. Her blue eyes, clouded with tears and pain, looked at me with a mixture of shame and rage that broke my soul. "Don't look at me," she screamed with what little voice she had left. "Get out of here. I don't want your pity." But I didn't move. In that moment I knew my life was about to change forever, though I had no idea how much or why. My name is Carmen Garcia, I'm 32 years old, and until that day I had worked as an elderly caregiver for almost a decade. I had seen it all, loving families who took turns caring for their elderly, and families who paid to get rid of the problem of having a sick father or mother. But I had never seen abandonment as cruel and absolute as that of Esperanza Herrera. The agency had called me on a Tuesday morning with desperation in their voice. "Carmen, we need you to go immediately to this address. It's an emergency. The lady is 86 years old, terminal cancer, and we just lost our 5th caregiver in 2 months. Nobody lasts more than 2 weeks with her." "Why?" I asked while writing down the address in an exclusive area of the city. "She's complicated. Very rich, very lonely, and very, very difficult. But she pays triple the normal rate. Can you go today?" When I arrived at the mansion, the first thing that struck me was the contrast. From the outside, it was a spectacular 3-story house with gardens that must have once been beautiful but were now neglected. Weeds grew among the withered roses, the central fountain had no water, and dry leaves accumulated in piles that no one had collected in months. The woman who opened the door was the housekeeper, a woman of about 50 with a face of total exhaustion. "You must be the new caregiver," she told me with a sad smile. "I'm Dolores, I've been working here for 15 years. Before, this house was full of life, but since Mrs. Esperanza got sick." She fell silent and shook her head. "She's on the 2nd floor. Have a lot of patience. The illness has changed her a lot." I climbed the stairs noticing that the family photos covering the walls told a story, a young and beautiful woman at her wedding, photos with 3 small children, family celebrations, trips, but as I advanced toward the 2nd floor, the photos became scarcer, more formal, until they practically disappeared. It was as if that family's life had gradually faded away. And then I heard that scream. After helping her up from the bathroom floor, cleaning her and changing her clothes, Esperanza Herrera let herself be taken to her wheelchair without protesting much. She was exhausted, physically defeated, but her eyes still burned with a mixture of wounded pride and contained rage. "How long do you think you'll last?" she asked me while I positioned her next to her bedroom window. The last one left screaming that it was impossible to work with me. The one before didn't even say goodbye, she just didn't come back one day. I looked at her carefully for the first time. Despite the illness, you could still see traces of the beauty she had been. Her high cheekbones, her elegant bearing even in the wheelchair, her hands that, although trembling, retained the grace of someone accustomed to luxury and power. But what struck me most was the loneliness she radiated, so dense you could almost touch it. "That depends on you, Mrs. Esperanza," I responded honestly. "If you let me help you, I can stay as long as you need." She laughed, but it was a bitter laugh, without joy. "Everyone says the same thing at first. Then they discover who I really am and run away." During the first few days, I perfectly understood why the other caregivers had fled. Esperanza alternated between periods of absolute silence and explosions of uncontrolled anger. One day she screamed at me for 20 minutes because the soup was too hot, the next because it was too cold. When I tried to help her bathe, she insulted me saying I was useless and didn't know how to do anything right. When I gave her medicines, she would spit them out or throw them on the floor. "I don't need anyone to take care of me," she screamed over and over again. "I've managed business empires, I've made decisions that affected thousands of people, and now I can't even go to the bathroom alone." But I had learned something important in my years as a caregiver: the anger of terminally ill patients is rarely against you. It's against the disease, against the injustice of losing control of their own body, against the world that keeps spinning while they fade away. And in Esperanza's case, it was also against the most absolute loneliness I had ever witnessed. Because in those first 2 months, not a single person came to visit her. One afternoon, while organizing her medicines, I saw her phone ringing. On the screen appeared Eduardo, son. My heart filled with hope thinking that finally one of her children was calling to see how she was. "Hello. Esperanza answered with a suddenly hopeful voice, almost youthful. Yes, Eduardo, it's me. No, I'm not well, the doctor says that. Her face transformed as she listened to the other side. I understand. Yes, I know you have responsibilities. No, it's not necessary that. It's okay. She hung up and stared at the phone for several minutes in complete silence. Then, with a voice so low I could barely hear it, she told me, he just wanted to know if I had already signed the papers to transfer the Japan properties to his name. He didn't even ask how I feel. That night, after giving her painkillers and making sure she was comfortable, I stayed a little extra organizing her room. There were photos on the nightstand, 3 small children playing on a beach, the same young woman from the staircase photos holding a baby, a family photo at what seemed to be a graduation. They were beautiful, weren't they? She told me from the bed. I thought she was asleep from the morphine. Yes, ma'am. You can see they were very happy children. Eduardo, Patricia and Roberto. I loved them more than my own life. I worked 18 hours a day for 20 years to give them everything I never had. The best schools, universities abroad, trips, opportunities. Her voice was breaking. And now that I need them, they're too busy with the lives I paid for to remember that I have a name. She turned over in bed, giving me her back, but I could hear her crying silently. The next day was different. Esperanza woke up calmer, although obviously she had had a bad night. The stomach cancer was rapidly gaining ground, and episodes of vomiting blood had become more frequent. Carmen, she told me while I prepared her breakfast, barely a few spoonfuls of oatmeal which was all she could retain, do you have family? I had. My mother died 5 years ago. It was just her and me. How did she die? Cancer too. But lung cancer. She smoked for 40 years. I sat next to her. The last months were very hard. Did you stay with her until the end? Of course. She was my mother. Esperanza looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before, as if it were the first time she really saw me as a person and not just another employee. What was her name? Elena. Elena Garcia. For a moment, it seemed like something passed across her face, like a fleeting recognition, but it was so quick I thought I had imagined it. Elena. She repeated thoughtfully. It's a beautiful name. From that day on, our relationship gradually changed. The screaming and insults didn't disappear completely, but they became less frequent. Esperanza began to talk to me about her life, not about her business achievements or her money, but about deeper things. She told me she had been widowed 20 years ago. Her husband, Rodolfo, had been the love of her life, but he had also died feeling abandoned by her. I never left work to take care of him when he got sick, she confessed to me one afternoon while I helped her walk through the neglected garden. I thought hiring the best nurses was enough. That earning money to pay for his treatments was more important than holding his hand. He died asking me why work was always more important than him. She told me about how she had built her real estate empire from scratch, working in an era when female entrepreneurs were extremely rare. She had fought against machismo, discrimination, and had won. But the price had been extremely high. I missed Roberto's first smile because I was in a meeting at the bank. I missed Patricia's graduation because I had to close a deal in the United States. I missed Eduardo's wedding because... She stopped and wiped away a tear. Because I thought sending a giant check was better than being there. Did you never explain to them why you worked so much? I asked her. I did it for them, Carmen. Everything was for them. I wanted them to never lack anything, to have opportunities one never had. But I think what they needed most was simply to have a present mother. The weeks passed and Esperanza's health deteriorated visibly. There were days when she couldn't get out of bed, others when the pain was so intense that the strongest painkillers barely gave her relief. But there were also moments of absolute mental clarity, where she told me stories of her youth, her first jobs, the obstacles she had overcome. One night, after a particularly serious episode where she had vomited so much blood I thought we would have to go to the hospital, she grabbed my hand with surprising strength. Carmen, there's something I need to tell you. Something about your mother. My heart raced. What about my mother? Elena Garcia. She worked for me 25 years ago. The world stopped. My mother had never mentioned working for someone named Esperanza Herrera. Are you sure? My mother worked in construction, but for a big company. My company. It was my company. Esperanza's eyes filled with tears. She was an extraordinary woman. Hardworking, honest, intelligent. But her voice broke completely. I betrayed her in the cruelest way possible. What do you mean? I accused her of a theft she never committed. I fired her publicly, destroyed her reputation, made sure she could never get work in the construction industry again. I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. My mother had died bitter, unable to understand why her professional life had been destroyed overnight. She had spent years unable to get stable work, cleaning offices at night and houses during the day, always wondering what she had done wrong. Why, was all I managed to whisper. Because it was easier to blame an employee who had no way to defend herself than to admit that the thief was someone from my own family. My nephew had been stealing materials for months, but when it was discovered, I chose to protect the family and sacrifice Elena. I got up from the chair, trembling with rage and shock. My mother died without understanding why they had destroyed her professionally. She died thinking she had done something wrong. I know. And I've lived with that guilt for 25 years. And what do you expect me to say? That I forgive you? That it's okay? Tears were running down my face. Do you have any idea how we lived after that? Do you know how many nights my mother cried wondering why no one wanted to hire her? Esperanza was crying too, but she didn't defend herself. I don't expect your forgiveness, Carmen. I just needed you to know the truth. And I needed to ask for your forgiveness, even if it's too late. I left the room in tears and confusion. I had cared for months for the woman who had destroyed my mother's life. Destiny had a very cruel sense of humor. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house trying to process what I had discovered. But no matter how much anger I felt, I couldn't forget all the moments I had shared with Esperanza in these months. Her repentance was genuine, her loneliness was real, and her gratitude toward me had been sincere from day one. The next morning, I entered her room determined to quit. But I found her worse than I had ever seen her. She was conscious but could barely speak, and had a very high fever. I immediately called the doctor. It's a matter of days, maybe hours, the doctor told me after examining her. Are her children coming? I called Eduardo, Patricia, and Roberto. The 3 calls were the same, they were very busy, they would try to get there as soon as possible, please keep them informed. None came. During the next 3 days, Esperanza drifted in and out of consciousness. In her lucid moments, she talked to me about her regret, not only for what she had done to my mother, but for all the wrong decisions she had made in her life. I don't want to die alone, Carmen, she whispered to me one afternoon. I know I have no right to ask you this after what I did to Elena, but please, don't let me die alone. And I couldn't do it. Despite everything, I couldn't abandon that woman who had made terrible mistakes but who in the end was just a frightened human being facing death. There's something else you need to know, she told me on what turned out to be her second to last conscious night. About your mother, about Elena. There's something I discovered when I investigated your work history to hire you. What thing? Tomorrow call my lawyer. He has something that will change your life forever. Esperanza Herrera died on a Sunday at 5:47 in the morning, while the sun was beginning to filter through her bedroom curtains. I was holding her hand, just as I had promised, when I felt her breathing become slower and slower until it finally stopped. Her last words were an almost inaudible whisper, "Forgive me, Elena, forgive me, Carmen." I sat there for another hour, holding the hand of a woman who had been my enemy without knowing it, my employer, my patient, and finally, something resembling a strange form of family. Tears ran down my face, but I didn't know if I was crying for her death, for my mother, for the secrets she had taken to the grave, or for the terrible irony of having lovingly cared for the person who had destroyed the life of the person I loved most. Dolores, the housekeeper who had worked 15 years in that house, entered the room and seeing the scene, crossed herself and began to cry too. She was a good woman, Carmen, she told me through sobs. She made terrible mistakes, but she had a good heart. These last months, since you arrived, I saw her more at peace than she had been in years. I called the doctor first to certify the death, and then the 3 children. The reactions were exactly what I expected. Eduardo, the eldest, answered on the 3rd ring with an irritated voice. What's wrong now, Carmen? I'm in an important meeting. Your mother passed away this morning, Mr. Eduardo. There was a long silence, but not of pain, but of calculation. What time exactly? I need to know for the legal procedures. Did you already call the lawyer? Patricia, the only daughter, was at a spa in Miami. Did it really have to happen right now? I have an important wedding next weekend. Can't the funeral be postponed until next week? Roberto, the youngest, didn't even pretend surprise. Well, it was about time. She had been suffering too long. Organize everything, we'll arrive for the funeral. None asked if she had suffered, if she had died in peace, or if she had said anything before dying. Not one. The following days were a whirlwind of preparations. The funeral was organized with the cold efficiency of a business, the most expensive funeral home in the city, imported flowers, a professional choir, and a ceremony that seemed more like a social event than a farewell. The children arrived the day before the funeral, and I saw them in person for the first time. Eduardo was a 50-year-old man, impeccably dressed, who talked on the phone even while viewing his mother's body. Patricia, 45, constantly complained about the hotel where she was staying and how depressing everything was. Roberto, the youngest at 42, seemed more interested in the properties than in the funeral. "When is the reading of the will?" was the first thing Eduardo asked me when we were formally introduced. "Mr. Mendoza, your mother's lawyer, said it would be tomorrow after the funeral," I replied. "Do you know if mother changed anything recently in her will?" Patricia asked me with a fake smile. "I don't know, ma'am. I was just her caregiver." Of course, said Roberto, but his gaze studied me in a way that made me feel uncomfortable. The funeral was exactly what Esperanza had predicted it would be, a show. Hundreds of people arrived, businessmen, politicians, representatives of charitable organizations. Everyone spoke wonders of the great Esperanza Herrera, of her business legacy, of her philanthropic generosity. But I knew the truth. I knew she had died alone, abandoned by those she loved most, carrying guilt that had tormented her for decades. None of those giving emotional speeches had been there when she was vomiting blood at 3 in the morning, or when she cried at night wondering why her children didn't call her. During the ceremony, I sat in the last row, feeling completely out of place among so much luxury and formality. But just before they closed the coffin, I approached to say goodbye privately. "Thank you for trusting me," I whispered to her. "I hope you can now be at peace." The next day, I presented myself at the law firm Mendoza and Associates. It was an intimidating place, with elegant offices and secretaries who looked at me as if I didn't belong there. I wore my best black dress, but still felt like an intruder. In the conference room were Eduardo, Patricia and Roberto, each with their respective lawyer. All dressed in designer mourning clothes, but no longer with tears in their eyes. Their mother's death had been more of a formality than a loss. "Miss Garcia," lawyer Mendoza greeted me, a serious-looking older man. "Thank you for coming. Please, take a seat." I sat in a chair at the end of the table, feeling completely out of place. The children looked at me with curiosity, probably wondering why a simple caregiver was present at the reading of the will. "We will proceed to read the last will and testament of Mrs. Esperanza Herrera," Mendoza announced solemnly. The first 15 minutes were predictable. Properties in 3 countries, shares in a dozen companies, bank accounts in tax havens, jewelry, art, luxury cars. Everything divided equally among the 3 children, as expected. Eduardo smiled while mentally calculating his inheritance. Patricia was already planning out loud which properties she would sell first. Roberto was taking notes on his phone. But then, lawyer Mendoza made a dramatic pause. "Now I will proceed to read a special section of the will, drafted by Mrs. Herrera just 3 weeks before her death." The atmosphere in the room instantly changed. The 3 siblings straightened in their chairs, their lawyers exchanged worried glances. To Carmen Garcia, who showed me in my last months what unconditional love means, who cared for me when my own children couldn't find time for a phone call, who gave me the dignity of dying accompanied and not alone like an abandoned dog, I leave the following. Eduardo stood up violently. "This is ridiculous. An employee can't receive inheritance." "Mr. Herrera, please allow me to continue," Mendoza said firmly. "I leave her the main house with all its contents, valued at $8 million. I also leave her a trust fund of $2 million for her lifetime maintenance, as well as shares in the construction company Garcia and Associates, which ironically bears her family's surname." My world began to spin. Garcia and Associates Company. What did my surname have to do with Esperanza's empire? But more important than money, I leave her something that will change her life forever and that will explain why destiny brought her to me. In my study, in the safe behind the portrait of my late husband, Carmen will find documents that reveal a truth I have hidden for 25 years. Patricia was screaming that this was impossible, that they would contest the will, that it was a conspiracy. Roberto was threatening to sue everyone present. Eduardo was talking about his mother's mental incapacity, but I could only hear the lawyer's voice continuing to read, each word falling like a bomb on my reality. "Carmen Garcia, your mother Elena was not just my employee. She was my sister. My half-sister, to be exact." The silence that followed was so dense it could be cut with a knife. My ears were ringing, my vision was blurring, and I felt like I was going to faint. Elena was the illegitimate daughter of our father, Aurelio Herrera, the product of an extramarital relationship that our family kept secret for decades. When Elena came to work for me 25 years ago, I knew exactly who she was. I knew she was my younger sister, that she had grown up in poverty while I inherited the family fortune, that she had come looking for me without knowing our connection. Tears ran down my face as the pieces of my life's puzzle began to fit together in the most painful way possible. But I was a coward. I was building my empire, fighting to be respected in a man's world, and Elena's presence constantly reminded me of our family's dark secrets. When my nephew began stealing materials from the construction site, and when the theft was discovered, I made the cruelest decision of my life: blame Elena for the theft to get her away from me. Eduardo had stopped screaming and now looked at me with a mixture of shock and horror, understanding the implications of what he was hearing. I destroyed my own sister's reputation, ruined her career, made sure she could never work in construction again, all because I didn't have the courage to recognize her as family. Elena died without knowing she had a sister, without knowing she belonged to one of the richest families in the country, without knowing that the money she so desperately needed for her medical treatments was within reach. My mother. My poor mother, who had worked 2 jobs until the day she got sick. Who had died worrying about the debts she was leaving me. Who had spent her last years cleaning offices at night because no one else would hire her. Carmen, you are my niece. You are the only real family that mattered to me in the end. You are more of a Herrera than these 3 children of mine who only waited for my death to inherit. In those documents you will find the DNA tests I ordered done discreetly with one of your hairs, as well as all the documents that prove Elena's paternity. Roberto was the first to react. This is impossible. She's nobody who manipulated a sick old woman. You will also find a 20-page letter where I narrate our entire family history, including photographs of Elena as a child, documents of her birth, and a complete confession of my betrayal toward her. Carmen, your mother came looking for me 25 years ago. She had researched our family, had discovered she was Aurelio Herrera's daughter, and came to meet her older sister. But I rejected her in the cruelest way possible. Dolores, who had remained silent in a corner, approached me and put her hand on my shoulder. I knew it, she whispered. I knew your mother had come looking for Mrs. Esperanza years ago. I saw them talking in the office, I saw how Mrs. Elena cried when she left. But I never understood why. The lawyer continued, I have lived 25 years with this guilt, Carmen. 25 years knowing I destroyed the only person who was really my family. These months I spent with you were the only ones where I felt truly loved, not for my money, but for who I was as a person. You gave me what I could never give Elena: unconditional love, care, and the dignity of not dying alone. Eduardo and his siblings had fallen silent, probably calculating the legal implications of this revelation. That's why I leave you not only my money, but also my surname. Legally, you were always a Herrera, Carmen. Your mother was a Herrera. And now I want the world to know it. I want you to have everything Elena deserved and never had. I want you to use this inheritance better than I used mine. That afternoon, after the children's lawyers promised to legally contest everything, I went alone to the mansion that was now mine. Dolores was waiting for me with the keys to the safe. I knew this day would come, she told me with a sad smile. Mrs. Esperanza asked me to give you this when you were ready. I opened the safe with trembling hands. Inside was everything she had promised: legal documents, DNA tests, photographs, and a handwritten 20-page letter. The photographs broke my heart. My mother as a child, playing in the gardens of the family mansion. My teenage mother, with the same face I had at that age. My grandfather, Aurelio Herrera, holding my mother as a baby, with a smile of pride I never imagined existed. Esperanza's letter narrated the entire story: how my grandfather had had a years-long relationship with my grandmother, how my mother had been born in secret, how the official family had kept this secret for decades. How my mother, as an adult, had researched her origins and had come looking for her older sister. Elena arrived at my office on a Tuesday in March 1999, the letter said. She carried all the documents she had found, all the proof that she was my sister. She was nervous but hopeful. She told me she didn't want money, that she just wanted to meet her family, that she had grown up feeling incomplete. I received her coldly. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about, that she must be confused. She insisted, showed me the photographs, the documents. And I, instead of embracing her as I should have, treated her like an opportunist who wanted to scam the family. When materials began to go missing from the construction site where she worked, I saw the perfect opportunity to get her away from me forever. I publicly accused her of theft, filed false charges, made sure the entire industry knew that Elena Garcia was a thief. I knew this would destroy her professionally, and that was exactly what I wanted. Elena came to beg me to drop the charges. She cried, told me she was innocent, that she needed the job to support her daughter. But I stood firm in my lie. The last time I saw her, she told me, "Someday you'll understand that family is the only thing that really matters. I hope when you understand it, it won't be too late." She was right. I understood too late. I closed the letter and cried for hours. I cried for my mother, who had died without knowing the truth. I cried for Esperanza, who had lived decades with that guilt. I cried for all the lost opportunities, for all the years when we could have been family. But I also cried with relief. I finally understood why my mother had been so depressed in her last years, why sometimes she looked at me with a sadness she couldn't explain, why she always told me that in this world we only had each other. The following months were an intense legal battle. Esperanza's children hired the best lawyers to contest the will, alleging that their mother wasn't in her right mind when she changed it. But the evidence was irrefutable. Medical exams showed that Esperanza was completely lucid when she modified her will, and DNA tests confirmed our family relationship. Furthermore, Esperanza had been very intelligent. She had left video recordings explaining her decisions, had multiple doctors certify her mental state, and had involved several independent lawyers in the process. After 6 months of legal battles, the courts completely ratified the will. I was officially the main heir of Esperanza Herrera, and more importantly, officially a Herrera. But the money, incredible as it may seem, wasn't what mattered most to me. What really changed my life was knowing the truth about my mother, about my family, about who I really was. I decided to convert part of the mansion into a home for elderly people abandoned by their families. I called it Elena and Esperanza House, in honor of my mother and my aunt. Every elderly person who arrives here receives what they deserved: dignity, respect, love, and the certainty that they won't die alone. In the main garden I planted 2 rose bushes, one next to the other. A marble plaque identifies them: Elena Garcia Herrera, 1945 to 2020, and Esperanza Herrera, 1938 to 2025. Sisters separated by pride, reunited by love. Eduardo, Patricia and Roberto eventually approached me, not out of affection, but because they needed my support to keep the family business running. Apparently, Esperanza had been smarter than they thought. Most of the companies depended on the shares I now controlled. I told them they could continue working in the family businesses, but under one condition: that a significant part of the profits would go to charity, especially for the care of abandoned elderly. They didn't like it, but they had no choice. 6 months after Esperanza's death, while reviewing some legal documents in what was now my study, I found one last letter that had been stuck in the bottom of a drawer. It was from my mother, addressed to me, but never sent. She had written it shortly before dying. "My dear Carmen, if you're reading this, it's because I'm no longer with you. There's something I never told you because I didn't want you to carry my pain. Years ago, when you were little, I discovered I had an older sister. A rich and powerful sister who rejected me in the cruelest way possible. She accused me of being a thief, destroyed my career, and made it clear I wasn't welcome in her family. Her name was Esperanza Herrera, and I hope someday she understands that money can't buy forgiveness or love. I love you, my girl. Take care of yourself always. Destiny, life, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, has a very particular sense of humor. It had sent Elena Garcia's daughter to care for Esperanza Herrera in her last months. It had given both of us the opportunity to heal wounds that seemed impossible to heal. Sometimes, when the wind moves the branches of the rose bushes in the garden, I swear I can hear their voices whispering the words they could never say in life: "I forgive you, sister." And I, Carmen Garcia Herrera, have learned that life is sometimes devastatingly unfair, but also miraculously redemptive. That love can bloom even in the most arid grounds of the human heart. And that real family isn't always the one born with you, but the one you choose to care for when they need it most. My mother and my aunt are finally together, and I carry their legacy, not the money, but the lesson that at the end of our lives, the only thing that really matters is the love we gave and received. Wow! What did you think of this ending? Did you expect this incredible twist? Tell me in the comments which part impacted you the most. If this story touched your heart, share it so more people can reflect on the true value of family. Subscribe for more stories that will make you think and feel.